So I got good news and bad news. How do you want it? What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do mean to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact, here we are to do a review of chapter 210 of Four Knights of the which is known as The Princess and the Boy. And notably, this chapter, dare I say, it's some SAG backwards. Which, of course, you know means gas. Because this chapter, it's like, now notably, it's gas for your boy. Mainly because it confirms something for your boy that I've kind of been wishy-washy on, back and forth, wibbly-wobbly, you know, wriggling my arms about like a little mantis shrimp. I don't know why I went with the mantis shrimp analogy there. Like, I don't even, like, they don't have arms. But regardless, it did something like that for me. It set up some certain things. It cleared the allegations behind a certain character. Cleared is a strong word. But basically, she got mogged. You're gonna understand that reference in a bit if you don't already understand it. But before we get into any of those beautiful, amazing, legendary, juicy, thick, scrumdiddlyumptious complications, a lot, unironically, thick and juicy is actually pretty apt for some of the characters in the show. But with that being the case, let's talk about this color cover page and how gash it is. Now, this is something that didn't even click with me in the live reaction, which ended up being like 33 minutes. So you can check it over on Patreon for those $1 month. You can remember for those $3 month to get the 33-minute live reaction to this very review or to this very chapter. But hey, ladies and gents, buds and pals, look at our 1, 2, 3, 4 knights. Well, what do you see? What do you see that's behind them? Oh, is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? I'm not counting all the stars. This is them presumably after or actually notably. You could argue this isn't canon though. You can argue in canon. But essentially this is just showing, once again, at least in Nakaba's opinion, clearly this isn't the main world based on, you know, the purple sky. This is Camelot, very specifically the Cauldron of Onflin. And if the many different panels showing stars before didn't convince you that Onflin at least was a multi-galactic, or I think the lowest end was like multi-solar, but like it has to kind of be multi-galactic for like the way light works, the way stars work, but a multi-galactic little space. Here's Nakaba being like, oh, here's another depiction of it with a whole bunch of stars in the background. And you can see all these big gaps here are essentially the chaos holes that lead to other places. I think actually no, because we don't, the Onflin is like sealed off. So I'm not sure, maybe these are just clouds in the sky. But regardless, it's nice to see some stars in the background and seeking the stars and scaling. We got stars and scaling with that. But regardless, before that, we do have Lancelot himself we gotta talk about. And let's talk about the build. The gate, how jacked and juicy that boy looks. Like, golly, from the bicep to the tricep to the shoulders to even the head. Like, he's just built. Like, I ain't gonna lie to you, he just like his daddy for real. Let's be completely honest, he just like his daddy for real. Look at these gains, And speaking of gains, we're not gonna transition over just yet. I do like the heavy, deep saturation of the red here. This is like, notably rare for Nakaba, I feel like. Nakaba's kind of not the guy to do heavily saturated stuff for his colorings. Like, notably, if I'm trying to think properly, like even in his like original sevendeadlysins run, like the colorings were never really all too heavily saturated, but this is like a deep, rich red, which I do like. It matches Lance's eyes very, very well, complements them, reflects very well off the gold in Lance's hair. Overall, just a really good red pick. And notably, you can see what I mean by the desaturation, because look at everyone else being actually rather desaturated. But even Lance's own like coat and pants are desaturated. But still, very, very solid design as always. Like, notably, dare I say, Lance is the only character in the entire series who has a design that just hasn't missed. Like his original fit, fire. His post time skip original fit, and I'm talking like, when I said original fit, I'm thinking all the way back to like, well, I guess maybe like the first depiction we ever see of Lance, where he's like wearing the white and stuff like that, before he gets King's clothes, essentially, because we know that his original, like his hoodie and tank outfit is like made by King. It was mentioned to be made by the Fairy King, and notably we know he just gets a bigger version of that once he's. Sorry, I thought I heard sorry. We know he just gets a bigger version of that once he's older. Like, I'm not sure if the clothes himself grew with them or just King kept remaking them. I mean, presumably they just grew with him, considering we know that King's clothes can shapeshift with them. But with that being the case, that design was fire. And then obviously his post-time skip design was fire when he was, first introduced. And then now he has this. Lance is just cooking with straight gas. Like there's not a single bad Lance design at all. So overall, he's cooking. He's looking fantastic. And obviously, look at him, undamaged, unharmed, untouched. The only thing broken is his blade because it simply cannot handle all of his. Hold on, where is it? Where are you? Here. Where there it is. All the way down here. His own power? His weapon couldn't handle his own. What's that button right there? What is that button right there? His wait, where is it? Yeah, what his own power? Why am I pressing X to doubt if I keep saying his power? Because it is his power, right? Okay, and the one thing I will admit, I didn't even realize that the X to doubt joke has always been wrong every single time I've done it because the correlation button doesn't work. Notably, I believe the X to doubt comes from an Xbox game, and X is in a different position than the X on the controls that I have. And I'll be honest with you, I never even played that game. I literally just stole the X to doubt from me. That's why I pressed the X button. Right? Sure, should I probably hit? I forget what the commenter pointed out. I think it's the A button. I'm not sure. I do have an Xbox controller somewhere over there, but I'm not taking that out. I haven't touched Xbox in years. So legit, whatever button is supposed to correlate to, I'm not gonna hit the corresponding button on here because that's not the X button according to the controller I have. And I know the correlation doesn't line up, but I'm gonna keep doing the X without me because it's the X button. All right, I'm sorry. All right. Thank you for the correction, though. I do appreciate knowing that I've been doing it wrong all this time. And notably, that even feeds into the doubt. I'm pressing X to doubt, but I'm not even pressing X to doubt. Would that be the case? His power? I wonder how accurate that is. But speaking of accuracy, why do I low-key not want Tristan to change the fit? In fact, we gonna zoom in a little bit on homeboy. Hold up. Yo, why he low-key got it on? No. Why he low-key got it on? No. And you know why I think he's got it on so much? I think it's one, because apparently Beltreep's name was just drippy in his youth. But also number two, it reminds me of Estarosa's fit. In fact, hold on. I made that comment in the revival, in the LR. Let me see. Estarosa. Let me peep his fit real quick. So it's not the exact same design. In fact, it's far from, but it's just the general, and notably it's shorter. Okay, so it has shorter tails than the trench that the Estarosa was wearing. The chest is covered up, which was the detail I did notice. But even the buttons are different, and the design of the little circles there. But so I don't know, something about the light blue. As much as I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Nakaba's penchant for desaturation, I actually do really I don't know, something about this fit works. And the more deeper saturated turquoise on the edge of the silver gauntlets and the bright blue saturated undershirt. I don't know, something about it kind of goes crazy. And notably, even Tristan himself, while he was, a little bummy, faking being after he was only really just bisected, something light for a creature of his ilk. He actually looked kind of hard. Why is this low-key the hardest base Tristan panel in the entire series? And it's not even a canon panel. He just looks real tough here. I don't know, something about my boy. He just looking right. And notably, he still is in possession of the Percival sword. We do know that technically the only of our 4 knights to actually get their specific sacred treasure from Dubs is this guy right here. Gawain is still wielding Rita. That's all she's got still. So I am hoping that now that we are back in the main realm, hopefully Dubs came along and started cooking or something, because Lance is obviously going to need one, considering, the broken state of his sword. But speaking of broken swords in general, it is very interesting that all of our knights, at least technically for right now, are swordsmen. It's weird, right? Notably, all the sins, in fact, was there any overlap in the sins? Escanor was an axe wielder, Diane was a hammer wielder, Meliodas was a sword wielder, Merlin was a mage, Gother was a bow user, Bond was a multi-staff user, and who am I missing? It's literally 7. How am I missing this much? Who am I missing? Oh, King was a spear user. So notably, all these 7 deadly sins had their own unique weapons and unique weapon styles, but at least for the 4 knights, technically they're all sword bearers. But also, I do think this feeds into the idea that none of them are actually complete, right? While it is cool to see Tristan wield the Percival sword, it's a nice nod to his daddy and all the strife that this Percival sword caused him as being the coffin of eternal darkness and stuff like that. I do think ultimately this is a sign that Tristan's going to eventually get a new weapon. Note how he doesn't even have Esterosa and Mayel on him anymore. They're just completely gone. Then, obviously, Percy already has his weapon. I do wonder if it'll get upgraded eventually, but I don't know. I highly doubt it. I feel like we haven't even seen the near depths of this thing before he could even consider replacing it. Then, even Gawain herself is technically wielding just, a sword, even if she does wield it differently, and it's not a traditional sword because it's the end of an axe piece. But ultimately, I do hope they get their different weapons. I hope they get more vast. Me, like many others, I really want Lance to get a spirit spear. Tristan, I don't even know what I really want for Tristan. Like, notably, a while ago, for Percy, I kind of went with the idea of him having, like, a power pole-esque or Nyoibo or Yui-esque thing where he could just, like, shape his energy around it, and that would just amp it. But notably, he kind of has it with the Force Circular, but the Force Circular is still a sword. So I don't want to give Tristan a sword, but Tristan's only been associated with swords, so I'm not sure what second treasure I get him. For Gawain, I would like a fusion of Alden and Rita. Like, somehow. I'm not sure how Dubs would do it. Maybe, like, in the center of Rita where the it feels good to be strong. I can just do that. But, like, maybe you mix the design and, like, maybe here, right? Like, where this is, instead of it being, like, the lady's head, you could do it to where, like, it's the Alden ball, and, like, that focuses and concentrates her magic, and then she can infuse whatever magic she chooses from Alden into the blade of Rita itself, or the new Rita. Like, essentially, I just wanted to have something other than this little baby piece of Rita, even if it is very cool how she uses it and mixes it into her attacks. But speaking of Gawain, I also hope she gets a different fit. Don't get me wrong, I think Tristan's fit looked hard, but I definitely think it's going to be replaced. Lance's fit is definitely debatable. I don't think it's going to be replaced. I think Lance is going to still be fine. I like how he never got a new fit in part 1. But Gawain's fit, as much as I do like it, it is the top Merlin, the bottom Escanor. Like, I want a little something different. I'm not exactly sure what I'd want, though. But I don't know. Like, as much as I like the design, I do want something different for her. And same thing for my glorious handsome legendary juicy son Percy. I do actually want a little bit of a different fit for him. We already know that this can't be canon because at the time that this fighting is taking place, Varghese has already sacrificed himself. So Percy even still having the cloak here is kind of like disqualifies the thing from ever being at all remotely canon. Not just including the fact that we haven't seen this interaction because it literally can't happen at this point. But that'll be gone, so I'm assuming Percy will have an excuse to change out the rest of the fit, because notably, as much as I like the coloration of everyone else's fit, from the, like, loosely saturated orange to the barely saturated blue to the heavily saturated red, Percy's, like, dry, spicy mustard look just ain't hidden. It's not like, notably, his sword looks better designed than his whole fit, which is kind of crazy, from the, like, the green, I don't want to say vomit. like the vomit green pants. And the mustard, the spicy mustard yellow. I'm not sure if that works for him. So I'm hoping all three of these guys do get new fits as much as I do like Tristan's current fit. But overall, a very, very, very W cover page. So while I do have it on me, keep it on me at all times. Let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into chapter 210, The Princess and the Boy. So we open up, and we do get to see that I need to shrink back down the page. We do get to see that Lance goes, huh? A girl came out of the lake. And Jericho says, no, look, she's standing on the surface. Having context for, like, what's standing on the, like, oh, if only you knew, Jericho. Oh, if only you knew. But they do make the assumption that she's just, chilling there. A woman is standing on the surface. Now, notably, the interesting thing I will admit, and it does definitely make me wonder, like, what the Lady of the Lake is going to look like in color, which I assume we're going to get eventually. They only call her a girl. And I guess she probably does have fairy-like traits, but they don't even notice anything slightly off-putting about her. Obviously, not the mighty meat she's packing beneath that waterline, but even just, like, her physical appearance, they don't know anything special, just a girl came out of the lake, which is very interesting, especially considering what we know who this is, Princess of the Lake, is the lake itself. It's interesting that she chose this form of all forms. It is very similar to the silhouette we got in Seven Deadly Sins. I'm not gonna say not, but deviated from that, but it's interesting that this is the form that she chose to take. Very humanoid, but seemingly having fairy-like ears, and obviously the inverted, or the black sclera and white pupils known, and notably white blank pupils, which are notorious for chaos. However, one thing that I will go on to point out later again, but I'll bring it up now, we will see that unlike the other chaos beings or the beings that are infused with chaos, not purely born of chaos, she does not have any pupil. Notably, we know, that, and I misspoke when I said white pupils earlier, but essentially with both Arthur and Kath, two beings that have absorbed pieces of chaos, even when they do get the black sclera and the white iris, they still do have like a solid visible pupil, even if it is a slit for Kath, because cat, and just a dot for Arthur, because human. Notably, the Lady of the Lake does not have any of these details in her eyes. She just has the white milky irises and presumably white pupils as well, which is very interesting. May speak to more of a testament of her being a pure being of chaos, as she'll go on to explain, because she says, "A pleasure to meet you, Lancelot." And notably, Lance is like, "Huh? Why do you know my name?" And Lance, I want you to take a wild guess why she knows your name. Maybe, just maybe, because it's been yelled out a whole bunch in a row. But, well, then obviously they don't know that. But we see that Jericho then asks, who are you? And the Lady of the Lake begins to explain. And once again, I'll tell you, we gonna get the little neck juicy upscale food. But we see the Lady of the Lake say, "I am a being born from chaos. The people who visit here call me the princess in the lake." Very interesting that it's the princess in the lake and not the princess of the lake, but I suppose it's because she maintains a certain illusion whenever interacting with the people of this realm, which she then essentially ends up breaking by the end of this very chapter. But with it being the case, I want you to keep that in mind. I am a being born from chaos. From chaos. From chaos. Keep it in the back end. Keep it in the back end. But we see that, notably, Liz is like, huh? A princess? Is that what you kind of bad, though? And we see that the Lady of the Lake declares... Oh, and notably, another thing I do want to point out about the Lady of the Lake. She has a different text font, and very noticeably, no text box. Almost as if it's meant to imply that her voice is literally coming from everywhere. And notably, I think... Let me... Sorry, I'm skipping super far ahead into the chapter. I want to see if she ever even opens her mouth. Like, I do genuinely think it's meant to be implied. Let's see. She's smiling, she's working here. I think she... Okay, no, so the mouth does open here. No, wait, I thought it was like a detail that she's literally broadcasting her thoughts into their head, which is why she doesn't have like a traditional speech bubble, because she's not saying anything. It's just like her thoughts being broadcasted through the realm into the people inside the realm. But no, she does actually open her mouth and speak later. But with it being the case, we still see that ultimately, Lady of the Lake is like, young man, you are very curious, young man. I would love the chance to sit and talk with you. And notably, Jericho, who's, still on timing, says, "This woman's bad news, Lance. Stay behind me." And Lance goes, "Sure." "Hey there, folks." And then suddenly, another person who's alive and conscious and not getting in the water. Or is it really water? And they see a person walk over and waving. Now, notably, I will admit, I kind of fell for the okie dokie first, because we do know that the Lady of the Lake is a being of chaos, a being created by chaos. We also know that the Lady of the Lake probably has some sort of ties to Camelot, another place created entirely by chaos. And actually, you know what? That raises a question I didn't even think about. Oh, do I talk about it now? I'm going to talk about it now because I'll probably forget if I don't talk about it now. I do wonder, and I'll go more in depth with it. I kind of want to talk about it now though, because I just thought, do I think I gamble on remembering it? Okay, I'm going to say now, I wonder if Camelot itself has a princess of the lake. Because we do know that this place is this woman. This princess that we see here, this fairy-eared lady with the black sclera and white irises and white pupils. Very, 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 very personhood. Very, very person-like, despite being a literal embodiment of a place. And Camelot being another creation of chaos, or at least the piece of chaos Arthur's wielding, which I assume is all, I don't know. There's so many things we gotta talk about soon enough, so we'll get them. Just focus on the idea that Camelot itself may have its own Lady of the Lake equivalent, or Princess of the Lake equivalent, because of how this woman is going to be revealed to function. But after she's saying she wants to sit and talk with Lance, a certain person comes up. "Hey there, folks!" And both turn in shock. "Huh? What are you doing here, huh?" And we see that Lance, desperate for another human being's contact, is immediately running over. Once again, note how they just acknowledge her as a woman, but do not acknowledge her as anything else, which implies that she may have a mostly normal appearance beyond the ears and the eyes, which is, once again, interesting. I do wonder why she has no pupils, but I do think it goes into the idea that both Kath and Arthur have a basis beyond chaos. She is a being entirely born of chaos, so she doesn't have anything in her eyes. Notably, she never has different pupils. Unlike the thing where I was confused a little bit, I was like, oh, does she actually ever talk, or is she just broadcasting her thoughts throughout the entire realm? Because she is the entire realm. No, we see her talk later. We never see her get pupils. That is an important thing. But we see this fellow walk up, and we see that Lance, being very trusting and very desperate to talk to anybody outside of his own master, who he's been stuck with for a while, is like, Master, it's a human! And Jericho goes, oh, wait! And Lance says, over here! We're lost and we can't find our way out! Now, notably, I see it now. I see it. I didn't even know. See? This is why I can reread all these numbers for you, dog. Because look at all these marks on this armor, my G. Look at all these marks on this armor. I thought it was a Camelot knight, but it's a different type of knight. And we see that Lance asks, hey, are you a holy knight? Maybe part of that group that went missing? As we do remember all the way back. I don't even think this was mentioned in the last chapter. All the way back in the Lance one shot, it was confirmed that it was random humans and, in fact, some holy knights that had gone missing inside the rain, quote unquote, with all the water that was flowing down. But, of course, we see that Jericho is, even while she's worried for Lance, just immediately rushing in to trust somebody, she is still, a little bit happy to see another person. Goes, ah. But, of course, she takes her eyes off the Lady of the Lake, or the Princess of the Lake. Actually, no. Does she introduce herself here? Yeah, no, yes, the Princess of the Lake. She takes her eyes off the Princess of the Lake for a second, and she's gone. What? She's gone. Where did she go? And once again, look at all these dark spots. I wasn't able to tell at first. I thought they were just armor designs. And notably, shout out to Nagla. I think this is like the first chapter in a while. I think even the last one too was like just fully complete head to toe. Like no missing images or anything like that, or no failed inking. Because notably, the reference that we're gonna get for this guy later wouldn't work if his armor wasn't fully detailed. But we see it is fully detailed. You see the markings on his head, the marking on his chest, and the guy goes, "Fool, what are you doing here, huh?" And we see that Lance says, oh, we were looking for all the abductions, or the abductees, whichever word you prefer. Then we wandered into this weird lake, but of course, homeboy asked the question, but they just shouldn't have been here. As he goes to grab the sword, and get her swinging. As poor little baby Lance, gets swung upon. But of course, Jericho comes in, saves Lance, but she actually does get a cut here. She does get cut by this swing here. So this guy is decently powerful enough to actually harm Jericho, who we do know is pretty powerful at this point. And she yells, "Look out!" And Lance screams, "Ah!" as they are saved. Once again, Lance being so tiny compared to Jericho, who I don't think is actually that tall. Like she's next to Bond, which just makes it really hard to tell how tall she is. But hold on, let me go Jericho, sevendeadlysins. I want to say like 5'6", 5'7". But all I'm saying is Jericho, who I don't think is like anywhere near 6 foot. Look how tiny Lance was. Look at the baby. Look at the baby. Oh, she is so far. Let me see. Oh, 5'3". So yeah, Lance was really, really tiny. He was very much like his mother when he was younger. His Bond genes had not kicked in yet because he's so tiny. I believe he came back at 13 with the strength beyond comprehension. So like at age 10, very, very tiny man. Considering look at how he's literally wrapped up all in this 5'3" woman. But we see that they roll and recover. In fact, I don't even think it's a roll. I think Jericho literally does like the tackle roll into the front flip off her hand into the recovery as she says, "Have you gone mad?" And which is very funny considering what happens soon. But we see that the guy's like, you can't have it. And then of course Jericho's like, huh? And the guy just, hits I'm not sure what sound this is meant to be, the HFFOOO. I'm not sure. Hifu? I'm not sure. But essentially he goes, "This lake belongs to me. I need to stop." And he just begins genuinely tweaking. He activates his magical ability, Spirit Squall. I meant to look this up in between the recording of the live reaction review, but considering the guy doesn't last too long, the Spirit Squall, like, I know Spirits rings a bell because Fortnite is heavily spirit-based with, like, Kyan and obviously our main character, Percival. But Spirit Squall sounds like a familiar move that I swear we've seen before. In fact, I'm just gonna pop into Google. I highly doubt it was gonna give me anything though. Spirit Squall, sevendeadlysins. Yeah, no. I think actually, let me see. Let me put in some because SDS came with something else. Seven deadly, not Seven deadly sins. Mangi. Let me see. Spirit Squall. Oh, it is. Oh no, slash squall. That's different. So maybe just squall is coming to mind, and spirit is mixing with that. But essentially, I was actually wondering if we had heard spirit squall before, but notably, we see spirit squall allows this band to launch out these multiple massive attacks. Some going into the lake, some going into land. And he's actually seemingly pretty powerful with spirit squall. Obviously, this guy never gets an aim, but still decently powerful enough. And Lance goes rolling as Jericho goes Lance, and then immediately, considering she's been. I put this without sounding meat. She's been drinking. She immediately goes, "You prepare to die!" And immediately, it is very funny because she'll go on to say she just meant to parry. Parry what, Jericho? What? Parry what? Because notably, she herself isn't even getting hit here. In fact, you can see all the attacks he lands straight up whiff on her. They just get close to Lance. And she immediately activates a Blizzard Axle. But you'll note that this attack is actually pretty darn large scale. Pretty juicy. And the Blizzard Axle is very powerful. And Lance even goes, Master? I didn't know you were built like this. As Jericho goes, Lance. Or no, notably she says, Lance will be hurt by no one. As obviously, Mr. Sugarwater over here is like, you can't have this water. It's my water. But of course, this Blizzard Axle essentially acts as a tornado funnel or spring and fires this nameless knight out of the funnel and straight into the water. And once again, let me reestablish the hierarchy real quick. At the end of, I'm not sure if I did this on the stream, which you can check out. I do stream pretty consistently now, mostly on the controller over on Twitch. But I think it was either in that or in the last video I mentioned the top 3 and how technically Lady of the Lake was top 2 for this chapter. But before we get to the point in this chapter where she fell off a cliff again, it was actually post-time skip, essentially this Jericho at 1, Gelda at 2, then the Lady of the Lake and turn the sevendeadlysins baddies. Let's be completely real. And we see that Jericho is absolutely moving. Now, I will admit, I can't tell if she's meant to be wearing heels here. Like, obviously she's wearing, like, a one-piece bodysuit. But, like, I'm not sure, like, if Nakaba forgot to draw her boot top here, or maybe, like, she's just wearing short heels. Like, that's why we don't see it. Like, it looks like she's almost barefoot here, but notably, that is a shoe. And she doesn't have a boot here. It just goes straight up the leg. But, with it being the case, she swears that no one will hurt Lancelot, and she launches the Nameless Knight into the water. And he goes, Arr! And then lands splash directly into the, in fact, let me start putting in quotations, the water. And we see Lance. I'm not going to hit it for the one time, but, like, for those who are probably thinking it should have been me, not him. Lance hits that on Jericho real quick, going directly for the cheek. Once again, this one is only 5'3". I know, like, look, remember, 5'3" woman right here. Lance is barely 3. He's not even 3 feet tall at this point. I know he's 10. He's also half fairy, but still very interesting how tiny the poor boy was. But with that being the case, he tackles his master, and obviously, Sugarwater over here is the water, the lake, this water, it's mine. All of it. I'm so sorry for anyone who had headphones in and had to hear that. But, I mean, that's what happened. And he gets in the water. Poseidon would be very, very happy. And he just drowns, essentially. We do not see this character again. He does perish into the water. And we see both Lance and Jericho look on with dots of concern. Because naturally, that boy was clearly crazy. And notably, Jericho points out something even more important. As Lance makes a bandage for her to cover up her wound that she got from the guy, he says, I'm sorry to make you do that, Master. I didn't realize you could really catch a body like that, for real. You're kind of built like that. And we see that Jericho says, forget about it. I'm your bodyguard. And maybe a little bit more. Lance, ever told you how attractive you are? Okay, I'm not gonna finish that sentence. Maybe because Jericho got mogged. We're gonna like I said, we're gonna explain that soon. Don't worry. We keep saying you got mogged. We're gonna explain it soon. And she says, but you don't mind going around in those tatters? And Lance says, heck no, revealing that he does have his midriff out now that he took off the bottom of his own hoodie in order to actually cover up Jericho's wound. Because as we can see, Jericho, oh yeah, she's just wearing the short shoes. It's just the angle that she's drawn at here that's hard to tell the shoes, because the shoes are very short. They're just cut off here. But you'll see, I think she even went in like this. She only has like her leotard, so she couldn't rip anything off without like exposing her own midriff, which is going to be a little bit weird considering she's just with the child right now. So Lance rips his own clothes. And we do know that this probably does mean a lot to Lance, not only because we know he loves Jericho, but we do remember that his clothes were made by the Fairy King, aka Harlequin, aka his uncle. So it probably did make him feel a certain type of way to have to rip Harlequin's own clothes in order to make sure that Jericho could be protected, showing his deep love and care for his master and just the determination he has. But we see that as Lance says, "Heck no!" Jericho says, "Oh, it's like the bond of old." And she laughs at Lance as Lance grins. Because once again, we know he loves being compared to his father at this point, as his father is the legendary hero, the Fox Son of Greed. But with it being the case, we see that Jericho admits, "Sorry to burst your bubble, Lancelotto, but I bet that night slaughtered the rest of the group." And Lance is like, What? What do you mean?" And Jericho says, "Didn't you see it? His blood-encrusted suit of armor," which is why I said it was actually a very good thing that this chapter, I believe last chapter 2, was fully complete by Nakaba, because notably I wouldn't have been able to notice it, but you can see it's very consistent across all his paneling. It's very thick on this one, it's very clear and noticeable, but even from his earliest introduction, his first panel, you can see the many spots of blood on him. And notably, the Lady of the Lake is watching the entire time as this night comes. But, of course, he couldn't last. No human could last here. And he gets thrown into the water. Now, who this was a Holy Knight for, because he did have Holy Knight magical abilities, I don't know. I want to assume Camelot. I still want to assume Camelot, but I don't think he's here serving any idea of Camelot. In fact, honestly, I don't even think Arthur knows this is happening. For a reason I'll bring up later once we get to the Lady of the Lake explanation for why she's here, how she's here, and what she's doing. But with it being the case, we see that Jericho goes on to explain, or Lance naturally asks, but why'd he do that? Why'd he give all those people back shots and throw them into the water? She says, "He told us he wanted the whole lake to himself. And honestly, that's not a bad idea. Maybe I mean, Lance goes, "The lake? You really believe that?" And Jericho admits, "The man lost his mind, to be sure. But this lake isn't normal at all. This space just goes on forever. That girl vanished into the lake," which, no, she didn't. She's right here watching. But that girl vanished into the lake. This water revitalizes you, body and soul, with just one drink. I meant to only parry his strike, but I couldn't hold back my force." Once again, look at what so she's already kind of gone. Because look at what she says here. "I only meant to parry his strike, but I couldn't hold back my force." Jericho, where's the parry? Where like, look. In fact, we gonna zoom extra in. Can I? Yeah, we gonna zoom extra in. Where's the parry, Jericho? Where's the singular? Not a single attack is near you. You just wanted that man gone. Like, don't play with me, Jericho. There's not a single attack near you. What? Was it gonna be this? Was it gonna be this single beam right here? Yeah, whatever. But obviously, that may be hinting at the fact that Jericho was already starting to go, and even see Blizzard Axel was very, very powerful here. As she admits that, "I only meant to parry his strike." Let me hit the wing real loud. "I meant to parry his strike, but I couldn't hold back my force. I think we should avoid drinking the lake water if we can, before we go too far over the brink. All right, Lance?" And Lance goes, Sure. Okay," as the Lady of the Lake, or the Princess of the Lake, watches on, clearly with a smile on her face, and sinks back into the water. Now, it is very interesting the approach that she takes, especially relative to the other people that we've seen get captured in this realm. As notably, they have communicated with her, and it's to the point that the man, this mystery knight, I call him Sugarwater, he doesn't even mention the Lady of the Lake, though clearly he should be able to see her by the angle he's walking. But of course, he may be entirely consumed by this point, and his mind may not be able to register anything other than threats to his lake. And we know that the Lady of the Lake, or the Princess of the Lake, is the lake itself, so maybe he doesn't even register her as, like, a feasible thing. But I want you to think of it, every single time they're drinking the lake, they're drinking her. Yeah, think about it. Think about it, rub it in your head. But with it being the case, there is a certain statement here. This won't be like this super, "Oh, sweet mother mercy, let's do backflips and tricks on the statement." But this space just goes on forever. Notably, in the stream I was doing of Silk Song, a certain Roman the Hollow Boy pointed out how, well, this kind of, the statement from the previous chapter mentioning about how the space just goes on forever sort of feeds into the unique chaos idea. And, I was a little hesitant. I was a little iffy, back and forth, wibbly wobbly. I'm not sure, infinite this, infinite that. But, it's just Jericho. She's making an observation, but maybe she doesn't know, right? She can't get the full size of the realm. If only the realm itself would tell us just how big it is, or how much raw power is stored away in here. Or just reinforce it, because, it was stated prior. So I will admit, certain ideas, and, this whole thing that I'm saying is hardly confirmed here. It's kind of been hardly confirmed for a while, but it's nice to get it doubled down or tripled down on at this point. But we see, as the Lady of the Lake sinks back into the water, and Jericho promises, or at least attempts to promise Lance, that we shouldn't drink too much of the water. that's like your boy. Especially back in my day. Notably, when was the last time I had? It's been months, funnily enough. But I'll be honest. Back in the day when your boy was a youth, I was obsessed with sweet tea. Something about like it had like an unhealthy, crazy hold over me. And like notably, I was a kid who like just didn't drink much soda growing up unless we were like eating out, which was rare. Because I don't know, my dad didn't like me drinking, so he's like, "It's unhealthy for you." So I didn't drink it. I was like a juice drinker. But then I got sweet tea, and I was just addicted. I was like, "Oh, I need it. I need sugar." Speaking of sugar water, sugar. And very specifically, I forget who I remember telling someone like, "Man, make sure you don't have too many sugary drinks." That would literally be me in my youth being like, "Don't drink too much, sweet stuff," and then immediately. And Jericho just going straight for it on day 116 though, and I believe this was day 23 that they were on in this moment where this whole interaction happened. So Jericho did make it a very, very long time, nearly 80 more days before, or actually no, nearly 100 more days because it was 23. It should be like what 90, 23 more days. It should be like 93, I think, because 16 minus 23 would be 90. 93, yeah. So it took her 93 more days. So it took her 3 more months to finally, well, lose it, or at least clearly lose it before our very eyes. As she does get... And, notably, unlike before, where I was like, it should have been me, not him. I now am not putting that in the place of Lance. I'm putting it in the place of the water. It should have been me getting slurped up, not the water. But we see that Jericho has absolutely lost it, getting slurping out on the lake. And we see that Lance is like, "No, master, you can't. If you drink that much, you're gonna get freaky." And we see that Jericho's like, "I don't care how freaky I get. Get off me." And she smacks Lance, backhands the poor boy. And Lance goes, "Master, I don't like it when you hit me." And we see that Jericho, very akin to the Lady Lake herself, is seemingly losing her eyes. If you'll note, she doesn't have pupils in this panel. Or at least, they're so pinpricked that I can't see them. But I just think she's just flat, doesn't have pupils. And like I mentioned, this entire chapter seems to be complete from head to toe, artistically wise, from Nakaba. I think this is very important that it is. So this is interesting, after consuming this being of chaos, that Jericho loses the pupils. And notably, pupils are very often like a sign of like something being there, like having light behind your eyes. So it's interesting that she gets more and more consumed by the idea of the lake and the mania that comes with drinking it, that she loses that. And she even says, I'm not going to give her the exact same voice that I gave tonight, but she says, "This is for your sake. Drinking this water gives me power. Then I can protect you. Can't you see?" So I'll give it a second before I explain how she got mogged. But whatever be the case, she's losing it. But after seeing the damage that Lance took, she snaps. Like her pupils come back and everything. Her sanity brings itself back for a moment. And Lance says, What's happening to you?" As clearly, his master didn't beat him before. She may have, trained with the boy, but she never beat him. But speaking of beating, that is I should not have said something. But essentially, I do want to go back and check something from chapter 209 real quick. I want to double check. Did they say they couldn't sleep? Because a sleeping moment, or at least what seems to be a sleeping or resting moment. That's it. Another thing the doctor does. When my dad was young, get bad guys, people like here and the lake looking bad. I forgot about that. The tentacle. So the lady of the lake. Oh, so she's been interested since day 3. She went to slurp him up, but then knocked it away. Very interesting that the lady of the lake was actually dissuaded by Jericho's attack. Then now I'm looking back at it. Meanwhile, she was able to slap off Matt Lance's shining robe, but she wasn't interested in him in the first place. But let me see. 3 days. Let me go to the 3 days later one. Shining Road. Oh no, 3 days later. I can't walk anymore. Hey, Master, was any doctor at all in these days? Where 2 things out. 1's path in the lake, and 2, drinking the water fills us without need for food. And strangest of all, we never get tired. Yeah, that's the thing. Strangest of all, we never get tired. So notably, that was mentioned, but she does at least seemingly go to sleep. Now, I do think this may be her genuinely faking it. Now knowing what is going to end up happening after this point, considering what she's going to do when Lance lets his guard down and begins to train. As he asks, what's happening to you? And Jericho goes, I'm sorry. I had no intention of laying a hand upon you. And Lance says, "No, it's okay. I get it." And Jericho apologizes again and again. I'm sorry, Lancelot." And she seemingly falls asleep here, which once again is funky considering. Yeah, there we go. Nice and smooth. she says, 2, drinking the water fills us without needing to eat food, and strangest of all, we never get tired. So, if they never get tired, how are they falling asleep? I know you can fall asleep while not being tired, but at the same time, it's interesting that she seemingly goes zzz, zzz, with it. But I think this was her debating Lance, as we'll see that he essentially uses the remains of his shirt as a blanket for her as she slumbers, and Lance looks down with his hair getting longer, looking more and more like his mother, as he begins to train, and he says, "I'll get out of here alive! I swear it!" And he swing the spear around, and he admits, "And next time, I'll be the one who keeps my master safe," which once again does retroactively, even this is obviously a flashback, this isn't really set up, but retroactive build up to his extreme obsession and fear of returning back to Benwick without getting Jericho back, as we know that ultimately he's going to lose Jericho by the end of this. He doesn't necessarily lose her by the end of this chapter, but we're probably going to see what ended up happening to her, how she ended up running over to Camelot to fill a desire that she probably wouldn't have been able to get due to the nature of what happened here. But we know she wants to keep him. He wants to keep his master safe and get her back, which is something that feeds his part 1 motivations, and clearly even his part 2 ones to a degree. We just haven't gotten as much of him as now to see if he still is super focused on Jericho. He did return to Benwick without getting Jericho, though, so I think he has gotten over it. And even at the end of the part 1 time skip, the loss of Percy was enough to make him return home, enough that he was sulking in his room to the point where Bond could actually note that. But then we see as he's swinging around the spear, and he'll be getting better and better with it, attacking the ground and everything. He says, "I know Mom is waiting for me too, if I want to see her again." He swings the sword, he thrusts it out, and says, "I want to get as strong as my dad is!" Which, once again, it's a nice, meaty, juicy Bond glaze. Now, I see the hot debate on whether or not Lance is even stronger than Bond. And honestly, I don't even blame y'all for having that debate. Right now, I like, Bond probably is just stronger. As people pointed out, Bond is sort of, both are in base-to-base, casually not really fighting, but they're sparring, exchanging blows, while Bond is clearly inebriated. And unlike certain characters who get a buff when they're inebriated, Bond is not one of them. And obviously, you can argue Lance is not going all out, or you can hold back against his dad. I do think the narrative is still actually genuinely hardline implying that Bond and even Mel, well, not even Mel, but especially Mel, are still superior to Lance. Which is going to be crazy considering what's going to be revealed by the end of this chapter. If not necessarily revealed, but heavily implied to the point of it might as well being a reveal. Bond and Lance and the Demon King and the Supreme Deity and the Fairy, like, let's just say the upscale is thick, or the retroactive upscale, if it even is retroactive after a certain point. But we see that he twitches and realizes, "Master?" And this is why I say she was faking sleeping, because notably, it's only once he gets so far away, she spontaneously gets up and throws herself directly into the lake, right? She wants the water. And at least by what's implied here in this interaction, as he says, if you drink that much, obviously she's not drinking just to satiate herself. She's being consumed by the mania. And we'll even see the Princess of the Lake go on to say, "You need to just give her a relief. Let her relax. Give up." So essentially, I'm assuming even though they are 116 days in here, Jericho probably lost it properly around like the 110, maybe even the 100s, and has sort of been diving into the water and looking for an excuse to get in, so she fakes sleeping in order to dive back in. Or that's just, like a little continuity thing where never get tired, but you can still fall asleep while you're not tired. Could be a mix of both. But with it being the case, we see that he yells, "Don't do it!" as she dives right in, only for Jericho to seemingly be saved, quote-unquote, by the Princess of the Lake, as Lance himself is restrained by the very same tentacle that restrained him all those days ago back on day 116. And notably, I believe the tentacle does pop out after he's consumed at least a little bit. Oh, so what happened to her boots? I guess Nakama maybe just forgot. And notably, yeah, what the heck? Now I'm looking at it. Why did her design suddenly why did she switch to a one-piece leotard? Did that happen this chapter? Is that just a new design for this? Like, I guess maybe she got hot or something? But she did actually have, like, a full... Oh. Okay, it looks like Nakama just misdrew it here. I'm looking at this. She has high boots here with the intricate design, and she's not wearing, like, a one-piece, like, leotard or, like, bodysuit. I'm not sure what it's called, like a one-piece, like, swimsuit. She's actually wearing, like, a one-piece, can we get like, full outfit. Like, it's a full bodysuit. But later on in the chapter, she doesn't have it. Like, her thighs are out here. But does she have her boots? Her high boots still? Yeah, she does. She has her high boots all the way, like, to the end of the chapter. Well, we don't see her feet by the end of the chapter. Oh, that sounds weird. But we don't see her feet. So, actually what happened, I guess Nakama maybe just changed her design. Look at that. I'm only noticing that because I went back to do the reread. But I think the full bodysuit was a mistake. But I think the high boots is, like, now it's just a continuity error. Because she should have the high boots still. In fact, the design of the shoes she's wearing, do they match? they technically do somewhat match like what the high boots were, but she's just not wearing the high boots anymore. Like look essentially just look at these two images side by side. She's in like a one-piece bodysuit here, and notably her arms are so I think Nakaba just forgot to draw it, because in fact, does she have them later? Yeah, she still has. So she has these later. So I don't know why she was like just underdressed for a couple panels, and like the boots got switched out. So I think Nakaba just was a little inconsistent on the design. At least artistically, he got the whole chapter done, but at least design-wise, there's little continuity between Jericho's entire outfit. So that's a design detail I only just noticed. But back to the chapter itself. We see Jericho thrown herself into the lake, but the lady of the lake does rise and recapture Lance again within the tentacle that captured him all that time before, which we will know is her tentacle specifically soon enough. You'll know why she was number 3, and then unfortunately, as big and beefy as your boy is, I don't think I can handle all what the Princess of the Lake is. But she does dive out of the water, quote unquote, and lift Jericho up in the water, quote unquote. And we see that he goes, this, and we see that the Lady of the Lake, the Princess of the Lake, I'm so used to calling her the Lady of the Lake, that's gonna be weird calling her the Princess of the Lake, but that is what she's called. So let's see. The Princess of the Lake says, she held out surprisingly long, but I see she's at her limit. Why don't you let her have some relief already? So essentially, I do believe that she's been going for it for a while, and this relief, quote unquote, will just be her getting in the water. But we see, and this actually looks like a short hair Jericho. I think just the paneling being cut off. But we see, and Lance says, "Was it you? Did you make my master go all crazy? What is this water anyway?" And here's the explanation, so I can finally explain why I say Jericho got mogged. Indeed. Anyone who drinks it long enough will die in time, unable to withstand it. This lake. Oh wait, no, this is transitioning process. Essentially, I've been saying Jericho got mogged, and how this is like the kind of sort of one bit of good news, even though there are other things of good news for like this killing thing. But Jericho got mogged. If you don't know what I'm talking about, because Elden Ring is now how many years old? In fact, when did Shadow of the Erdtree come out? When did Elden Ring Shadow? I feel like it was 2023, right? Shadow of, maybe it was last year? Shadow of the Erdtree drop. Because I'm pretty sure that's when the allegations, when Mog was free of the allegations, come out. Was it 2023? 2024? Okay. So it's a bit over a year ago at this point. But essentially, yeah, 2024. So there's a character from Elden Ring. And notably, funny enough, this comes from a guy who's played Elden Ring, but watched a bunch of Elden Ring videos and has some knowledge of Elden Ring lore. There's this character named Mog. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but I just call him Mog. And he was accused for a long time when the base game was out to be a little bit too freaky for one of his siblings. You know, he did some devious, dastardly, and diabolical things all over one of his siblings, Mikola. If you'll know, obviously, I feel like the most famous mention of that is not even the character Mikola itself. It's Melania, Blade of Mikola, who I know has had a lingering impact. When I finally ever do sit down and buckle down and play Elden Ring on stream, you will see me struggle against that fight immensely. Against that whole game immensely. That'll be my first Souls-like. But with it being the case, well, not first Souls-like, it'll be my first Souls game, or at least one made by FromSoft. But with it being the case, we see that what Mog essentially had were allegations, right? And once Shadow of the Erdtree came out, we got the full lore behind Mikola. I found out Mog was the one getting... Can I make that joke? He was getting less than mogged. Right? Like it was the opposite of what the allegations initially were. This isn't the exact same case for Jericho, but she had allegations of being into, a little bit weird. But we know now that realistically, I don't even think she's ever into Lance at all. Like, I think she does just generally still care for him and love him. But thanks to the insanity caused by 116 days of drinking the lake water, which we'll find out isn't even water, her mind has, like, broken. And obviously just being alone with Lance for so long, like, whatever emotions, which may have been love in some shape or form, were twisted and warped by the insanity of the lake. And we know, as we saw with Sugar Water earlier, this desire for the lake will stick with you beyond it. Like even if you're not currently drinking the water, even if you're out of the water, obviously Sugar Water slayed all the people who wanted the water with him. It'll clearly last for a while. And I'm thinking what happened with Jericho is that she doesn't actually like Lance. Like that's not a thing. But her affections for Lance were twisted by the insanity of the lake, and notably, considering what was going to be revealed of what the Lady of the Lake wanted and was basically canon, and what a lot of people have assumed realistically ever since Lance's insane magic power was introduced, I think Jericho is even still in love with Lance because she sees Lance as the lake. As we know, the princess of the lake wants a vessel, or we're going to get into that soon. But here are the two statements that combination kind of just like essentially, I better never hear anything about a multi-continental verse ever again. A planetary verse ever. I better never hear it. Because we see the lake explain, indeed. Sorry, that was Zemnis of all characters. But, indeed, anyone who drinks it long enough will die in time, unable to withstand it. This lake, after all, has accumulated an infinite store of power. Now, this is the only one that I don't like. Like notably, Nakaba always throws in a caveat. He's like, pocket sand. But accumulated sounds like a process that took place over time, like gather together or acquire an increasing number or quantity of, gradually gather or acquire as a resulting whole, gather, build up. So I don't like that word being used there, but I think there's a certain point. Essentially, the lake is an infinite store of power. Infinite power. True, not like endless, not balanced. No, infinite power is stored within the lake. And she explains, as Lance questions, an infinite store? Suddenly, a piece of the lake rises up, and the princess of the lake explains, yes, in fact, this isn't water at all. It is magic force itself, made visible by the sheer density of it. And this does make sense. If you'll remember, all the way at the end of the Seven Deadly Sins original, it was hardline confirmed that the Demon King wasn't even chilling around Salisbury for no reason. He was chilling at Lake Salisbury, which you know is at least seemingly the physical manifestation of the lake in the real world, considering this is a separate space from that place, so maybe very much akin to the flower field that leads to the capital of the dead, and the many holes to the demon world that exists all over the mortal realm. It seems like maybe the Lake of Salisbury is a direct link to this realm, because the Demon King went there to restore his magical power, because the realm itself has an infinite store of strength. Now note, the Demon King didn't go insane, but the Demon King also wasn't drinking the water, he was just directly absorbing the magic from it. But I want you to remember, an infinite store of power. I wonder who created it. But with it being the case, the water being pure magic force, made visible by the sheer density of it, is actually very impressive. And once again, an infinite store of raw magic would be crazy for a single being to have access to. But obviously that single being may not be able to wield all that power at once. I wonder who that single being is going to end up being. But with it being the case, this is the line. This lake is a massive storehouse of magic, one created by chaos itself. Now it's over. It's like admittedly, I was kind of, and this is a me thing exclusively. I know Ignil, I know many others have been pushing, like just hard pushing the uni chaos stuff since realistically ever since the statement first dropped, right? Chaos created the world. World was translated as Sekai, or at least in the original text it is Sekai. Sekai can only mean society, planet, or universe, right? Like those are the three main translations. It wouldn't really make sense for it to mean society at all, because obviously there was no planet, there were no people. So it did make humans and all the other, and they made the gods. They made their own worlds and society, so it couldn't have been society. World itself was even questionable, because like world in that context wouldn't make sense, because it's implied that the Supreme Deity and the Demon King also went on to make their own worlds, which contain stars and stuff like that. And obviously, those are separate spaces. I mean, the Supreme Deity and the Demon King were not actually stronger than Chaos, so if they're creating entire worlds with like stars in them and stuff like that, they can't just be worlds. So it would have to kind of be universe. The only reason I was always so hesitant against Uni Chaos is because it was said to come from the ancient stars, and the ancient stars implies the universe existing beforehand. However, this lake is a massive storehouse of magic, an infinite storehouse of power, infinite store of power, infinite power. All right, infinite store of power, infinite power. Might as well just drop to the store of part. One created by chaos itself. Chaos made this. Now, is it possible for something to produce energy beyond its ability? Not really. Not really. But, with that being the case, if Chaos did, which clearly it did, obviously this was stated all the way back in the original series, and it was another buffer or support to Uni Chaos, they created this infinite store of magic. And notably, it didn't take all their energy. They also still made Cat, they also made the gods, they made the fairy, like, they made all that. So, Chaos being Uni Plus is basically hardline. Like, it's basically impossible to downscale. Now, you may be thinking, okay, Chaos is Uni Plus, but what does that mean for characters who interacted with Chaos? And by interacted, I mean sealed it away. I mean characters that brawled with it before. I think everyone's kind of getting a fat, juicy backscale, especially since we know what ends up with Lance. But once again, before I get too heavily into the backstory, I do want to read a little bit further to talk about how this isn't just necessarily upscale chaos, anyone who interacts with it, so like, you know, Lance himself, who ends up fighting Chaos King Arthur, but we'll also end up backscaling and upscaling the sins, in particular, and also the deities as well. But with it being the case, we see Lance says, "So you abducted all those people? What are you trying to do? Tell me!" And ultimately, the Lady of the Lake, or the Princess of the Lake, says, "Don't." And she declares, "Stop treating me like a villain. I've done nothing wrong. I deserve pity, not hate. It's all the humans' fault for being too weak to withstand this. They can't stand it when I get up in their guts and swim around in them. They're the ones drinking it, and they're the ones dying. That's all." So, obviously, the Lady of the Lake herself is also insane. for the longest time, I was like, or by longest, I mean like the week, I knew she existed. I was like, wait, maybe I could drink her up. You know, maybe I could fit. No, I couldn't fix her because I don't think she wants to be fixed. She is nuts. She is literally kidnapping people, abducting people, and essentially, if not directly gaslighting and offing themselves, like legit providing all the means and metrics. This place has no other form of sustenance. If you do not drink the water, eventually you will just die. So she traps them in this place. At least off this first interaction that we see with Jericho and Lance, at least in 209, does not interact with them at all. Literally, she only showed up directly outside of this one tentacle grab she does on day 3. She only shows up properly 20 days later, or like 23 days in. That's when she first shows up, and we have this interaction at the start of 210. And even then, she has one direct little interaction with them and leaves. So she's clearly not very straightforward of what she wants. At least not at first. So you will be forced to drink the water. Remember, humans can only survive 3 days without water, and I think 14 days without food. So you do need to drink the water eventually. You will be... I kind of skipped to this, and why I said I couldn't handle all that, and I'm not sure anyone who can, unless, I'm trying to get freaky. But with that being the case, she is a villain. She is evil. But it's clear that this long time of solitude, this just existence of being infinite, because remember, she is the lake. She is the Princess of the Lake is the lake itself. She is this body. She is this infinite magic power. She's lost it. She's been stuck in this place for so long, so alone, that she literally has no concept of what being good or evil is. But she notably has enough sense of self to recognize that she doesn't want to be treated as a villain. She feels pity for herself. So she's lost. She's nuts. And in very similar ways, she does actually remind me of current Arthur. The idea of, I'm not evil. I'm not wrong. I'm doing the right thing by wanting to eradicate all the other races and seal them away and make the world just for my own, even if it means destroying the original world created. Like, clearly, chaos in itself leads to these weird contradictions where people will just be blatantly evil and then be like, me? Evil? All I did was kidnap people who didn't want to be here and force them in a scenario where they were subservient and or drank the water or died. How does that make me evil? So, like, clearly... being a little chaotic, just a teeny tiny bit cuckoo. They'd be a little bit nutter butters. But speaking of nutter butters, this is why I couldn't handle all that. Earlier on the chapter, Jericho said, "Oh, she's standing on the water." She was not standing on the water. She was not standing on the water. She was, in fact, and we know the water isn't even water, it's magic. Oh, water, oh man. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do love the design, and very particularly the tentacle that wraps around Lance in last chapter, and wraps around Lance again here, you still see it wrapped, is very similar to the same tentacle design that we see Arthur himself wield whenever he's channeling his chaos powers. So I do like the uniformity of that. And very much, I love how the design for this lady, this Princess of the Lake, even though she admits the magic is not water, it is magic, just given solid physical form, so it looks like water, I do like how her form, unlike Arthur himself, who has very humanoid and very diverse monstrous designs, this is realistically just a big sea creature. Notably, you have the spikes of a pufferfish, the claws of a lobster and a crab, the tentacles of a squid, the octopus tentacles. You have the shell of maybe not a conch shell here. you have the eye of the, or like these are eyes, but it's not like a typical anglerfish, but like the anglerfish tentacle or whatever that thing is called, the angler, the angler itself, which at the tip is an eyeball. And notably, even this very structure, like this here, it looks very whale-like. Like notably, this is a combination of sea beasts as the Lady of the Lake or the Princess of the Lake. Even it is still somewhat considered a lake. It is water-based. So she has a very water-based design that still fits into the chaos motif. Once again, Nagaba is fantastic at drawing these amazing designs that so perfectly tie into each character. And this is why I say I couldn't handle that. Can you handle this? Can you? I'm very specifically thinking of Mal right now. Like, Mal, you got that? You still slaying that? I ain't. I can't handle that. I'll stick with Jericho and Gelda. Thank you very much. I can't handle all that. This thing is probably, well, maybe not as big as Diane, because Lance is only, what, like 3 feet tall? So, like, maybe not, maybe this is 10 Lances? And then it could be a perspective thing. So maybe this is, like, a whole Diane tall. And I don't think I can handle full-size Diane. I don't know how King does it. I think she shrinks down. But with it being the case, the Lady of the Lake admits, and that's why I'm so curious about you. How you still retained your wits, despite how much of the lake you drank. It's very interesting, right? She still calls it a lake, right? So it's why she still has a sea-based design. Even if she says this water isn't water, she still does have this idea of the lake, and she's even called the Princess of the Lake, which implies that Chaos gave her that name when it created her. Which, once again, feeds into the idea that Chaos does have a will, despite Arthur saying it's a will without will. But, all that being the case, if I had to hazard a guess, why Lance has such a fantastic capacity to absorb all this magic. And obviously, like, if you couldn't tell, if this doesn't hardline confirm for you because it's not explicitly stated, Lance absorbed the lake, right? The reason he and Jericho got out after the 3 years, and we know this is technically not even a full year in, because remember, Lance went in at 10, got out at 13. So this is day 116. So 365 days times 3 is 1,000. Think. 1,095, I do believe. One thing. Because three, oh man, I'm bad. My math is struggling. No, it's, I'm stupid. That's it. I gotta do this mental math. 300 times 3 is 900. 900, and then that's 120. 120, so that's 1,020. 1,020. 1,035. There we go. 1,035 days. Lance and Jericho are only 116 days in from when they were captured. So 116 minus 135. So they're not even like at their first 1,000 day. Hold on. Let me just make sure. I did that mental math, but let me just whip out the calc just to make sure. I believe 3 years is 1,100. No, just 1,035. 1,035? Is that right? So that's, yeah, 1,035. 365 divided by times 3. 1,095. 1,095? Why did I get? I was wrong there, right? I'm stupid. Sorry, the math is not math right now. Sorry, it's been a long day. But whether being the case, 1,035 minus 116, 979 days. So they still have 979 days before they get out, supposedly, assuming they were in there for a full 3 years. So he's gonna somehow have to drink all this water. And you're like, well, how is Lance able to do that? How is he able to absorb it? How is he able to act as a vessel for the Lady of the Lake? Because that's clearly what's implied here, right? As Arthur even pointed out, let's see. Not here. Here. As Arthur even points out here, by the end of the chapter, he notes that he understands the source of Lance's strength now. I think he may have a good idea of the secret behind his strength now. It's clear that Lance is the vessel for the Lady of the Lake, right? That's why he has the infinite store of power. But how can he hold it? How can he do that while maintaining his sanity? I think it's because of his soul and his biology. And realistically, it's a bit of both. Notably, we do know that souls of the soul of the parent can definitely have an impact on the soul and the biology of the child. We see this with Meliodas, Tristan, and Elizabeth. Notably, Tristan, for all intents and purposes, shouldn't have any goddess powers. Maybe like, Pencil, why is that? Elizabeth is literally a goddess. She's not. She is a human in a human vessel with a goddess soul. But her goddess soul is so powerful and so deeply intertwined with the human vessel that Tristan popped out with goddess biology. Seemingly enough goddess biology. Notably, he is never really described to have goddess biology. He's called a Nephilim. So he must have some. But at the same time, it could just be his soul being affected because his mother had a goddess soul passed down to Tristan. He got goddess powers. So we know that is a unique hybrid case where the goddess soul overrode the human biology. And while Tristan is clearly part human, not entirely human. And the same case is probably for Lance. We know that Bond's soul went through drastic evolution during his time in purgatory. Like, literal cracked to the moon and back levels of evolution, development, and insanity. So, with that being the case, it's looking his soul's evolved beyond the normal standards, on top of his just insane base stats and his insane base biology, thanks to surviving purgatory. And we also know, despite only not being the strongest character out there, she is in fact a royal fairy. And you may be like, what does that have to do with anything? They're practically immortal. Think about it. Gerhardt hasn't aged a day since the 3,000 year past. And she's the only character to, I think, outside of Mel himself, the only character to, well, and Merlin. But even then, Merlin stopped her time, so that doesn't count. And Mel was immortal, so really that doesn't count either. Essentially, she's the only character from the 3,000 year time skip that actually lived out the 3,000 year time skip. She saw all 3 fairy kings. She saw, obviously, her brother. Then she lived through Dahlia's reign. Then she lived through King's reign, and is still just fine. She has not aged a day, despite how much time has passed. So we also know that fairies, or at least royal fairies, have insane, and I do mean insane, levels of biology. So, with that being the case, I am willing to put some beans on the idea that Lance's base biology is so heavily juiced, jacked, and thick that he has basically an infinite reservoir because of a very heavily evolved soul and his very heavily advanced base biology. That's what my guess would be if I had to have one. But yeah, that's my theory. Ultimately, I don't have a genuine answer though, but I had to assume it's that. I don't know why else. Or it may once again just be feeding into the general narrative about hybrids in this series, where like hybrids are just cracked. Obviously, the only super cracked hybrid we've seen is Lance. Obviously, Tristan is he's struggling a little bit, but even him as a hybrid gets glazed a lot for being a hybrid. And he does have unique hybrid-esque abilities, so I'm assuming it may be a mix of just him being a hybrid, but also his parents just have really, really good high levels of, like, longevity, like, altered soul properties, innate potential. Like, obviously, I think Lance is, or he does have the capacity for infinite power, and this is where I go into the idea of the giga upscale for, like, literally everybody, because of what is obviously going to end up being Lance's fate. Before I get into that, let's keep going. We see that the Princess of the Lake explains, "Ever since I was granted life as this lake, I have been bound down here by myself. It has been truly, truly lonely." Now, down here is interesting, because I'm assuming that refers to the mortal realms. Like, is this meant to be like a purgatory equivalent? Like, notably, purgatory has kind of been interpreted as a bunch of different things, like what it's supposed to be the allegory for. Especially with, like, the demon world existing, and obviously, you know, the demon world being ruled by the demon king, you know, demon. So, like, everything she mentions down here, which implies it's, like, a level below. So, like, we know this is a separate space, but, like, in the cosmological sense, like, if you were to plot out the different realms on a map, I'd assume, like, the mortal realm, or the world created by chaos, is probably, like, the centerpiece. And then all the other realms have places around it. Maybe the fairy trees to the right of it. Maybe the goddess realm is above it. Or the celestial realm is above it. And then you have, like, the Lady of the Lake and the demon world and purgatory, like, beneath the mortal realm. And, like, the capital of dead somewhere floating to the side. Like, I don't know. I would love to get, like, interdimensional, I know this sounds so stupid, but, like, an interdimensional, and wherever Camelot is, too. I wonder where that would end up being on that map. Sadly, it's its own realm now, too. But, like, a weird, almost like how we have the map of the DC multiverse. I'd love to see Nakaba give us like a description or like a drawing of how the worlds look situated next to each other, because we know they're all interconnected in many different ways. There are ways to get to the demon realm, even though it's a separate space from the physical space that is the mortal realm. Same case for the fairy realm and its little portal. So like there are links in where they're connected, but I wonder, like, spatially, how does everything look on like a map? Obviously it'd be 2D, but still it'd be interesting to see Nakaba portray that. However, she has, like I mentioned, kind of gone insane from being lonely. However, she mentions, "Then, one day, I thought about going inside of someone else." So yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you are into the Lady of the Lake, she's going inside you. Now, I know many people are into that, so be happy. But with that being the case, we see that she says, "Of someone else, so I could go venture beyond here. I've been luring in humans ever since." Our chats help pass the time, too. So, she's been doing this for a while. Now, notably, I'm almost certain this has to be after the death of the Demon King. It has to be. The reason I'm so confident in that is because this has never been a thing before. And obviously, you know, I'm not sure how long Nakaba's actually had the Princess of the Lake concept, like, written down and idealized like this, but I just believe this is, like, a recent phenomenon, considering there was a reason for now that people are getting kidnapped. That's what Lance and Jericho were investigating 116 days ago. So I do wonder what was the trigger for it though, like in universe. Like was it legit? Because we know she was able to communicate through the Lake of Salisbury as long as people were there. In fact, she was colluding with Merlin very clearly, or at least seemingly. So like, I wonder what changed. Like, what made it realize, oh yeah, I can just do this. I can just rob people from the mortal realm, and very specifically, just the mortal realm. This is why I'm talking about like upscales for all the deities, and then anyone who scales to the deities, especially characters like Bond, Mel, like essentially, my thing here is, she's only taken humans. I've been luring in humans ever since. Note, she never ends up luring in a fairy, never ends up luring a demon, a goddess, and the giant even. None of those get lured in. Only humans. Now, of course, there are two ways to interpret this. The most base and like, we're not going to upscale everybody interpretation is one, she just has an innate fascination with humans because she's a being created by chaos, and chaos had a fascination with humans. And I don't think we know who was created first. I want to assume the Lake of the Prince of the Lake and the lake itself was probably created before humanity, considering she's the one who explains the whole cosmology to us. Right? She's the one at the end of Seven Deadly Sins telling us how it works. So I'm probably assuming she predates them, but it is entirely possible that the will of her creator still is somewhat influencing her and focusing her fascination on humans. But the other sort of like upscale interpretation, and this feeds into the idea of the Supreme Deity and the Demon King being able to seal chaos away in the first place, is the idea that she can't access their realms. Notably, we know the fairy realm, the celestial realm, and the demon world are all in separate dimensions. Like, I mean, they're usually described as spaces, but still separate dimensions. Like, you can access them from the mortal plane, but you can't, like, go there easily. Even the demon world portal, while you can just wander into there, it'll kill you if you aren't ready, if you aren't prepared for it. Just walking through that portal will kill you. And then, we don't actually know of any more. Well, we had the Door of Grace, or the Light of Grace, but that was corrupted, like, 3,000 years past. So we don't know what physical portals exist between the goddess realm or the celestial realm and the physical world. We know Mael traveled through one to get to the mortal realm, obviously from leaving it and going back during Cursed by Light. And we've seen the portal to the fairy realm. So, like, we've seen that. But notably, I wonder if the Lady of the Lake literally doesn't have jurisdiction over those, because those are ruled by the other gods. And the reason I say this is so important in a possible upscale is the Lady of the Lake has infinite power. She can steal anyone she wants. She's only stealing humans, though. And it's very interesting that she doesn't have any interaction with any of them. And notably, she doesn't even know why Lance is this way, implying that she doesn't even know what the other races are, as she mentions. But that's a weird thing, though, because we know this is the same woman who was explaining the entire cosmology to the Seven Deadly Sins and us at the end of part 1, or I keep calling it part 1, and the end of Seven Deadly Sins. But she doesn't even consider them as, like, possibilities. Obviously, because the Demon King, the Supreme Deity, and the Fairy Tree, presumably, as well. It wasn't mentioned like those other two, but presumably it didn't want any of their creations worshipping chaos as well. So maybe that's why it's out of respect to them or out of fear of them, but it's weird that she doesn't even try to take the other species. As she mentions, but in the end, no human appeared that was stout enough to withstand the lake. What a poor, pitiful being I am. Once again, very self-deprecating, but like, probably shouldn't be doing it like that, but like, you're a little cuckoo. And we see, she says, but I'm sure you understand how I feel, don't you? You're different from other humans. Special, I am sure. See, that's the thing. She doesn't know. She doesn't know that he's half fairy. Doesn't recognize that his biology center. It's like, it's weird. Like, why does she not have any sort of recollection of any of that? But of course, obviously, well, let me just get to the end of the chapter. We're one page off. As Lancelot says, stop with all that darn yapping and get your hands off my master! Which obviously she doesn't have hands on your master. She has her in a bubble of magic water. But we see, or a bubble of sugar water. We see Lance attack, break the tentacle that binds him, seemingly with a kick as he throws the spear at the Lady of the Lake, or the Princess of the Lake. That's the end of the chapter, though. Obviously, I don't think it did anything. But here's my thing. Lance obviously absorbed the Lady of the Lake, right? Like, whatever, over the 965 days left or whatever, he absorbed all the magic. He is the living vessel for the Lady of the Lake. Lance has a store of infinite power. Now, the only question for whether or not this is an upscale for Bond, an upscale for Mel, an upscale for the gods, and all that, is how strong do you think Lance is? If you think he's at all comparable to anybody else, or anyone else is at all comparable to him, whether that be Bond, through, you know, their neutral interaction so far, whether that be Mel, through just narrative and stuff like that, or even Arthur himself, who wields chaos itself. If chaos was able to create an infinite body of magic, just infinite power, literally just a source of infinite power, then that means Arthur should have access to that same level of force. And anyone who would scale or be a threat to Arthur would also be Uni. Obviously, anyone who would scale the lands would also be Uni. So, like, is this Sins upscale? And obviously, anyone who interacted with Chaos prior, if Chaos was to create this realm and this being who just has infinite power at her disposal, the Supreme Deity and the Demon King, who in the past were able to seal Chaos away. And notably, I like the headcanon that the reason that the Chaos was sealed away in Hawkmama, aka a giant a giant moss husk, is because the fairy tree actually helped. The fairy tree made that. Obviously, the Supreme Deity and the Demon King were the only ones to actually do that. So even if they had to work together, they were able to seal away a being that was capable of creating something with just infinite power, flat out. That's obviously very heavily implied case creating the universe. So essentially, a lot of the Seven Deadly Sins universe is that at least the top tiers are probably like at the lowest end multi-galactic at this point, if not just flat out Uni, with multiple infinite power statements. Lady Lake containing infinite power, the mortal world or the entire mortal realm being created by Chaos itself, just because the other translation of Sekai just don't work for what we know for Chaos created. Lance has that level of power, and we've seen other people be able to compete with Lance at least somewhat. Arthur has Chaos itself, which created that, which should mean that Chaos would scale above its own creations, or at least it should, and it seemed to, based on how the Demon King Supreme Deity had to gank it. So, like, legitimately, fat upscale for basically everybody. And obviously this just feeds into the idea that Arthur's realms are like multi-galactic in scale, individually. Heck, even like I mentioned all the way back, I mean, this is a very chunky reveal, I'll admit. Remember how I mentioned how look at all these different stars in Anfun? Well, guess what that means. Arthur made that realm probably multi-galactic once again because he's holding Chaos and bada bing, but like notably, it's just almost everyone of relevance is Uni now. Like, obviously not the other knights themselves. I don't think any of the knights scale to Lance. Like, I don't think Tristan, Percy, or Wayne, like, they don't scale anywhere near Lance. But for any characters who would scale to Lance, such as your Mel, such as your Boss, arguably even Full Power King, depending on how you feel about that, if Arthur just fears the sins in general. I think Gother wouldn't, just because Gother just really doesn't have the feet. Like, he's a base Chaos and Bell Treat victim. Unfortunately, Gother, you're not built like that. But, well, you know, he was absolutely canceled. So maybe Gother was just poorly matchup checked there. But essentially, unless I'm reading this wrong and clicking things together that just ain't supposed to be clicking, unless these stones that I'm clacking together that make sparks ain't sparking right, I think we got Uni, just juicy Uni, just plus as the standard for a bunch of characters, from Lance, who absorbs the lake, the lake herself, who just is the infinite power source, Arthur / Chaos, probably not Cat, but like Arthur and Chaos, who obviously Chaos created it, and then Arthur has complete dominion over that. Mel, Bond by being threats to Arthur still, and obviously seemingly being comparable, if not flat out superior. I've seen arguments for Bond as being flat out superior to Lance still, current 18-year-old Lance, who still is obviously the vessel for the Lady of the Lake, and that's kind of it. Like, the only argument I could see against it is like, well, Lance can't wield all the power all at once. He can't expel it all at once, but it looks like his base stats are raised to the point where he's absorbed that much power, even still. Other characters still able to compete with him and survive him. So, like, it just seems like a universe now. It seems like it's just consistent. And I'm down for that. But obviously, that's the heavy, thick, juicy power scalar man in me. And I think the chapter's worthy on, like, a narrative and character writing level. Absolutely. I'm happy Jericho got mogged, aka she probably just went crazy and had her mind messed up, and notably is fiending for the lake inside of Lance and not necessarily Lance himself, clearing her of any of the weirdo allegations. Thank the heavens. It took way too long, but hey, we took what we can get. The tragedy of the Lady of the Lake, even if it is clearly a tragedy that she believes purely of herself, it is kind of sad that this woman, who is this infinite store of power, kind of just went insane and ultimately lost her mind after being in solitude for so long, and thusly was forced to this devious, dark, and diabolical plan, and doesn't want to be seen as a villain, but clearly is a villain. Lance's own struggles here to maintain himself, maintain his master, and all that, very, very good. And just the general structure, just a very solid chapter, good backstory, good reasoning for why every character is the way they are, the decisions that end up, and obviously fantastic for scaling. So overall, just a gas, honestly, dare I say, a 10 out of 10 chapter from Nakaba Suzuki Sensei. Dare I say. But, of course, those are my thoughts. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you made all the way to the end of this video, please do me a favor and leave an infinite cold world in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure the notifications so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, you have a Patreon below, you support me for as low as $1 a month. Things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. Also, now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. So also include the 33-minute live reaction to this very chapter, add variations of all my videos, and if you become a $12 Patreon, $12 member, you can order whatever video you want. Also links to my co-fans down below. You can drop 5 minutes for a short video, to whatever you saw in video, or any beats at all. Any support is always greatly appreciated. Now, thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Red Wolf 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zera, Brandon Payne, J2MA, Guillaume, Buddha Ura, Alex Kenny, Enzo, Swift Strike, Super Flame 0, Yuki Ally, Azo2404, Striker Man, Aso8, Plant Crone, Grim, Black Sage, Marco222, Straw, Twisted, Ollie, The Boy, Corey Watson, Damon Brown, Magic, and CCC. Then, I'd like to give a thank you to our line art tier patrons: A+A, Kevin, Encarnacion, Dread Zoan, Sean, and Midnight Lord 21. Then, I'd like to give a thank you to our Ink tier members: Austin Wimberly Auchia, King RTX, and then Shrimpo the 4th Shrimp 06. Then, I'd like to give a thank you to our digital art tier members: J Warrior and AZ Void. Then, I'd like to give a final thank you to our colored art tier patrons: Walkie Munoz and Walkie Munoz.